Hey guys, Chance here with Rocky Mountain, here to help you find your proper piston to cylinder clearance. So as you run your motorcycle, the piston and cylinder begin to wear out. And this wear is the main reason why we throw in a new top end. Today I'm throwing in a new top end on a KTM 300XCW. When we tear down our motor, it is essential that we measure the bore of the cylinder so that we can verify that our cylinder is within spec and we can order a stock size piston. If it's not within spec, we may have to take a different route. So today I'll show you how to properly measure the bore of your cylinder. Now the first step in measuring your cylinder is to have it off the bike and completely clean. We don't want any debris getting in the way of our measurements. Second, we'll need a few tools. We need a telescoping gauge set and some calipers for measuring. Now as we begin our measurements, there are 6 total measurements we need to take. These measurements are also known as an X and Y measurement. So to begin our X measurements, we're going to measure from the intake side to the exhaust side, and we're going to take 3 different measurements. We're going to measure at the top of the cylinder, middle, and the bottom of the cylinder. Right here we have a paper to help represent and keep track of our numbers as we measure. Our Y measurement will be from left to right, and we'll measure the same at the top of the cylinder, middle, and bottom. And again, we've got our paper to help represent and keep track of our measurements. Now we're ready to start off with our first X measurement. Again, the X measurement is from the intake side to the exhaust, and we're going to start measuring at the top of the cylinder. So we'll take our gauge, insert it into the cylinder, and loosen up the back side. Now from there, to find an accurate measurement, we need to have the gauge perpendicular to the cylinder, and we need to find the widest point of that cylinder. An easy way to do that is to move the gauge back and forth, and you can then find the widest point. We can then go ahead, tighten down that gauge, pull it out, and measure it with the calipers. Now to keep track of that measurement, we'll go ahead and write it down on our piece of paper. Now moving on to the middle measurement of the X-axis, this may be a little bit tricky, especially with 2 strokes, because we have ports in the center of the cylinder. So what I like to do is I take my gauge, and I usually like measuring directly above the ports. If you want, you can measure below the ports, and if you want to be safe, you can take both measurements, above and below. So we'll go ahead and take that measurement and write it down, and then after that, we'll go ahead and measure the bottom of the cylinder, and then we'll write it down. Okay, now that we have the X measurements, we can go ahead and work our way down on the Y axis. Again, this is going to be from left to right, and we're going to take those same 3 measurements at the top, middle, and bottom of the cylinder. So we'll go ahead and do that now. Okay, so we've taken down the 6 measurements of our cylinder, and as you can see, on the X axis, I wrote down both millimeter and inches. In most service manuals, they will give both measurements, but for our case, we're just going to stick with the metric version. And as you can see, all the measurements came out to be 72 millimeters, except that first measurement. I went back, rechecked the measurement, and it was actually a true 72 millimeters. This is also a great reason why you should always write down the measurements to check for any discrepancies. Now that we have all this, it's time to go to our service manual and check our cylinder wear limits and our piston to cylinder clearance. Now that we've checked our service manual, we know that this cylinder is in spec. The spec for this machine is between 72 millimeter bore size and 72.012 millimeters. Because this is in spec, I'm able to order any OEM or aftermarket standard bore size piston. Now, if your cylinder has a lot of hours on it and it's slightly out of spec, you may be able to fix that. Some OEM manufacturers on their diagrams offer OEM pistons in different sizes. Some of those sizes may be able to fix the piston to cylinder clearance. However, if your cylinder is out of spec, it does need to be replaced. Or another option is that you could have the cylinder bored out to fit an oversized piston. We now have our cylinder bore at 72 millimeters, and our final step in finding our piston to cylinder clearance is measuring our piston diameter. Once we have this measurement, we can then subtract this from the cylinder bore and we'll have our clearance. So to properly measure our piston, most manufacturers recommend that we measure on the skirts a short ways from the top. On this piston, KTM recommends that we measure 50 millimeters from the top, and I've put a mark down where I need to measure. So I'll go ahead and take this measurement and then we'll write it down. Now the measurement we got from our piston is a 71.88 millimeters. After subtracting that from our cylinder bore, our piston to cylinder clearance is 0.12 millimeters. Now the service limit on this bike is 0.1 millimeter. So unfortunately, we are out of spec and we do need to throw in a new piston in order to get the proper piston to cylinder clearance. But be sure and check your service manual for your proper specs. Now, depending on your situation, we've got your back. We've got anything from OEM pistons to aftermarket, standard bore to oversized, and we even have big bore kits and complete cylinder kits. So if you have any comments or questions, be sure and comment below. And if you want to see more how-to videos like how to rebuild a top end, be sure and subscribe. I'm Chance with Rocky Mountain. Thanks for watching.